Alright, today we're going to take a look at the We Are Rewind portable cassette deck. Now, I first heard about this a couple of years ago, at which point there were quite a few of these kind of things doing the rounds. On the back of the slight cassette resurgence, I immediately dismissed it, along with all the others, because I know that you can't get a decent cassette mechanism anymore. You can get a rudimentary one, a workman-like device, quite a chunky thing. Even in a personal stereo, you can't get those nice, neat little super slim things that Sony once used to make. And therefore, I'll just keep using my old Walkman. But of course, people often get in touch with me and ask what kind of device should they get hold of. And it's not as easy to say anymore, just get an old Walkman, because there's so many of them that just aren't working anymore. So it would be nice if somebody was making an effort with a modern day cassette deck. And the reason that I agreed to have a look at this one is because I think they might be trying their best. Now again, the mechanism is going to be that same inelegant mechanism used in a lot of modern day devices, but you can make it better than a lot of these cheap things by just taking a bit of effort with it. If you put a decent quality motor in it, you put a metal flywheel in it, you make sure that the playhead is stereo, that all the circuitry that goes around it isn't humming and buzzing and making a hell of a racket. You could potentially use that mechanism to make a reasonable cassette deck, and hopefully that's what this is. Now, it's available in 3 colours. This one is Surge Orange. There's also Kurt Blue and Keith Black, I think that is. Let's have a look at it. I mean, we'll do the usual tests. We'll test out the wound flutter, all the rest of the stuff, check the speed, see if it's okay. Let's find out. Now, I just want to clarify that this was sent to me for free, and therefore I activated the paid promotion tag at the start of the video. You'll have seen a little message pop up at the bottom as a result. I haven't been paid to make this video, but since this is worth some money, I consider that payment in kind. Now, notice on the side here it mentions the rechargeable battery. I've seen the specs for that quote that the battery life is either 10 hours or 12 hours, depending upon which spec you read. So let's cut it down the middle and say it lasts about 11 hours. And notice we've got the recording function on here. So it records. Of course, it will have an automatic level control. But one question I've got is, does it have a permanent erase magnet? Or is it an electronic magnet? I suspect it's going to be permanent erase, which produces quite noisy results, but it would show they've gone the extra mile if they put a proper electromagnet on here. So let's find out. Okay, so we've got an instruction booklet and a pencil, which of course is a nod to the fact that people refer to winding tapes with pencils, and as I've mentioned in a previous video, it doesn't really fit, although you might have seen a video from V Westlife where he figured out that it was actually Japanese pencils that fit, and of course the instructions came from Japan, and that's what everyone's referring to. But Western pencils don't wind tapes unless you hold them at a weird angle. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get into this. I'll link to that video at the top, by the way, if you want to see it. So we've got a USB-C charging lead. I think it's USB-C, isn't it? Let's have a look. Yep, there we go. USB-C. Headphone output, volume, and this is the input to record onto the tape. Just want to check there's nothing else in the bottom of the box. No? Right. Yeah, it is a permanent erase magnet. It's quite awkward trying to get the angle on this, but if we just have a look at the back there, you see that blue section there? That's the magnet. Now, the way that you can tell it's a permanent erase one, well, the colour tends to give it away. It seems to be blue more often than not, but other than that, the fact is that it doesn't come down when you press the playhead. That pops down, but the blue section stays away from the tape, and that's because it's a magnet all the time. If it had been an electromagnet, it would have come down at the same time and would have been used to guide the tape through. And of course, it wouldn't erase the tape until it was activated, but they're keeping it away from the tape because it's permanent. Now, if I just push my finger down to activate the record tab and press the record button, you can see there, now it's coming down, and it would come down to meet the tape. So if we press it together with the playhead, there we go. Of course, in the middle there, we've got the play/record head, which of course is stereo. Of course, we've got the familiar transport controls on the top here. Quite clunky in operation, but that's all part of this mechanism. Need a little bit of force to push these down. These aren't soft touch controls. And notice here we've got the play pointing this way, which therefore means that that is fast forward and that's rewind due to the orientation of the cassette. A couple of indicator lights at the top here, and that will be the Bluetooth pairing button for Bluetooth headphones and or speaker. And notice the record button of course can't be pressed down at the moment because the record tab is in its up position at the bottom there. Okay, let's see if we get a charging light somewhere when I plug this in. Oh, there we go. Right, so whilst that's charging, I'm going to read the instructions and we'll see if there's any interesting things in there worth pointing out. Okay, looking down the specifications, first off it says it's compatible with all the tape types 1 to 4. Yeah, not sure about that. I mean, it'll be able to play them back. Whether or not they'll all sound perfect is another thing, but it doesn't really matter. Most people are going to be playing Type 1 or Type 2 with the Type 1 equalisation anyway, if it's a pre-recorded tape. Anyway, moving past there, playback, 0.2% wow and flutter. Now, that doesn't sound brilliant, but when I compared it to some of my other Walkmans that I've had a look at recently, they were hitting around about 0.2%. It was only really the high-end ones I had that got down to 0.1 or below. So if it does actually achieve 0.2 or just under, it'll sound pretty much the same in that regard as some of the other Walkman models I've got, proper Sony ones. So we'll find out about that. And it goes on about the recording specs here. If anyone wants to read through there, the battery life, 10 to 12, so I was right at picking 11. Dimensions and weight. Right, okay, so that's all the specs. Pretty good instruction manual this as well. It's got everything covered as far as I can see. Yeah, it's a nice clear guide for anyone who's unfamiliar with the operation of a cassette deck. It's all clearly laid out here. I'd imagine that's really the market that this thing is being aimed at. People who haven't owned or used a cassette player before. Oh, and I should mention the button layout makes perfect sense if you use it this way round. So let's put a cassette in. I recorded one on another machine earlier on. We'll try the recording function later. Now, in here they have to go in the door. You can see the holder in the top, and it's, as you can see, that's a little bit tricky sometimes just to get it located properly. You really have to hold it upwards. Right, let's put some headphones in and I'll take a listen and I'll give you my impressions. Okay, initial impressions are a little bit mixed. This tape contains some music from the YouTube audio library. I put that on there with a different tape recorder so I could play it back to you through this so that you can hear what this sounds like. But I played it first of all and I noticed a little bit of a whine in the background there, a kind of motor noise I think. So I put in this blank tape here so I could just play it with no audio on it at all and turn the volume all the way up. And yeah, there's definitely a bit of a background noise. I'll turn the volume all the way to the top and demonstrate it to you, and you'll be able to hear it come through, and then when I press stop you'll hear it disappear. So just have a listen to this. Okay, now obviously what you were hearing there was the worst case scenario. We had the volume up to maximum, I had the headphone output going into the mic input on the camera, but still, even with these headphones on, I could hear that faintly in the background. It wasn't as noticeable as that. But I think one way to perhaps get around that might be to use Bluetooth headphones, because then if this motor noise is somehow causing electrical interference with the headphone output, well, maybe once it goes off to the Bluetooth chip and transmits it, maybe that disappears. Let's find out. Okay, so first off I'm going to have to put my cassette back in with some music on it. I think we'll press play on there so I can hear when this is coming through. And this is going to be the Bluetooth button on the top here. Yeah, it should go in pairing mode if I hold it down long enough. It's flashing, that looks like it now. So I'll turn my headphones on, I'll put those in pairing mode as well, and hopefully it comes through. Right, well that was quick. The headphones are already connected up, so let's have a listen. Okay, I've just returned from the garden. I'll explain why in a second, but I am still getting that electrical background hum noise coming through the Bluetooth headphones that I was getting with the wired ones. It does sound a little bit different through these, but it's still there. The reason I was outside, I wanted to make sure that this interference I'm picking up isn't coming from anything in the studio. So I stood in the middle of the garden and I'm still getting it there. So it's definitely something to do with this. I think it's the motor getting picked up by the electronics. I'll try and demonstrate what it sounds like on Bluetooth to you. So I'll take the cassette out, so we're just listening to the motor here, and if I press play on this, what I'll do now, I'll take my lavalier off my shirt there, I'm going to pop it in my ear, well, inside the cup of the headphones, and then pop these on my head. So just give me a second. Okay, now just to be fair, the sound that was a little bit like Morse code coming across on the top there, I think that's down to stuff inside the house here. But the lower level bed, the kind of constant hum, that's emanating from this device. Okay, so I've got the Wow and Flutter machine out here and my test tape, and just for anyone that's unfamiliar with this, the idea is that this contains a 3 kHz tone, and when it's played in here, this machine measures how far away from 3 kHz the tone actually is. And it'll determine whether the tape's playing slow or fast, and whether the tape is playing at a constant regular speed. Now, for me, when I look at Wow and Flutter, I've noticed over the years when I've been testing things, if it gets down to around about 0.1% to perhaps 0.15, I'm fine with it. When it starts getting past 0.2, I notice it on the audio. But when it comes to speed, I don't really notice very much difference whether it's playing at 1% fast or 1% slow. That's just me. So I'm pretty loose with my requirements on these things. Yeah, we're looking at around about 0.2 to 0.25%. It's jumping up a little bit now, but it seems to reside in this area here. And I'd prefer it if the needle was on the other side of the two and was hanging around in this position here. When it gets up to this point, I start to notice the audio sounding a little bit wobbly. If it goes past 0.3, it's not very pleasant to listen to at all. I think this would be bearable, but it's certainly not ideal. And that speed has now gone all the way up to the top, so it's definitely gone past 1% fast now. Let's just move it down and we'll see where it's settling. So we're looking at the bottom row, that'll be 1% fast, 2% fast. Yeah, it's just over 1% fast. Now, whilst those test results are nothing to write home about, I think it's worth putting this into context when you compare it against another portable stereo cassette player that I tested a year ago. This machine has been running for at least 6 hours, and the results are, after all that it was running at least 3% fast. It pegged the needle. It could go quite a bit beyond there. But looking over to the Wow and Flutter on the right, that varied a lot during play, but regularly hit numbers up to 0.7%. So these are perhaps the worst results I've ever had from a cassette player, one that wasn't actually properly broken. What I'll do here, I'll play you some audio off this cassette, and you can see what you think about it. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. I was trying to find out what Bluetooth codec they were using, so I went on the website, and the only information I've got here is that it's Bluetooth 5.0, and it says the codec is AC6925. Now that is not a codec I'm familiar with. I'm expecting something like SBC, AAC, aptX HD, that kind of thing. So I looked up this number here, and it turns out that's the chip they're using, the AC6925A. And looking through the specs on that, it doesn't give me any more information. Bluetooth 5.0, basic rate, enhanced data rate, Bluetooth low energy. I'm sure if it was anything special, they would have mentioned it. Okay, let's try recording something. So we've got the input on the side here, and that's a line level input. So I'm using the line out on this device here. This is just playing an MP3 from the YouTube audio library. Cassette in, press record. Take the pause off, and that's it. We are now recording, so we'll have a listen back to this in a minute. Okay, let me just explain what's going to go on, because it might look a little bit odd on the video. What you're going to see here is the audio being played back from the original file and then from the tape recording. However, I'm going to be showing you B-roll of both of these just to give you an indication as to what you're listening to, but you'll see there's no wires coming out of either of them while I'm doing that, because what you're listening to is the original audio file overlaid on the video, and then you're going to be listening to the recording off the tape, but that was recorded back into this via the line in, and again that's going to be overlaid on the video. And I also did that recording away from this location to avoid any electrical interference. So we're comparing the original audio file to the tape recording. So let's get on with it. Now there's one feature that you might take for granted when it comes to cassette players, but it's not included on this device, and I think it's down to the mechanism that they use. Auto stop. Whilst it does support auto stop on play, which is what we're doing at the moment, so when it reaches the end of the tape you'll see that button there pop up, it doesn't support it on either fast forward or rewind. So if I just go back a little bit and then fast forward, you'll see once it reaches the end of the tape, not a lot happens other than the tape stops moving, but the button is stuck down, and if I was to put my ear up against this, I'd hear the motor still whirring away inside, so it's down to me to press stop. So yeah, auto stop is for play only, but not fast forward or rewind. Now I suspect there are quite a few people who would want me to open this up and take a look inside, and believe me, I would have done that if I could have figured out a way to do it without breaking it. You see, there are no visible screws anywhere except within the cassette compartment. There's one at either corner. Now to get to those I'd obviously need to take this door off, but to do that I'd have to break it. You see, the way it's been assembled, as far as I can figure out, the inner lining of the door here is a clear plastic component which has these plastic edges on either side which are clipped into recesses in the metal case. Now that will have been put on while it was flexible. They'll have been able to bend that in and clip it into place, but then to that piece of plastic has been glued this metal door on the outside which is now holding it rigid, and therefore I can't bend any of it in enough to be able to open that wide enough to get to the screws. And after all, maybe they want this back at some point, so I'm not prepared to break it, but I think we could figure out what was in here anyway. I mean, this is a familiar mechanism, we've seen it before, there's nothing really interesting about that at all. The only thing I'd be intrigued to find out is whether they'd used a metal flywheel, but I suspect so, given the results I was getting on the Wow and Flutter. Other than that mechanism, which had taken up pretty much all the internals here, the only things left would be the battery and a circuit board for this kind of stuff here. So there wouldn't be very much to see anyway, but I'm afraid we're not going to be able to have a look at it today. Okay, so to summarise, I was never expecting to be blown away by this. I entered this with quite meagre expectations. I was hoping to be pleasantly surprised, but as it is, I've come away rather disappointed. Whilst I think they've got this mechanism running quite smoothly, the speed and the Wow and Flutter aren't excessive given what they've got to work with. The issue for me was really that noise floor, the buzz, the hum that was coming through on the headphone output, whether wired or Bluetooth. Now, as for things I like, well, the first one is the case. I like the fact it's made out of metal. It adds a touch of quality to the whole thing. The fit and finish on this is very nice as well. The shut lines on here, everything's very neatly put together. I like the colour choices they offer as well. The Bluetooth headphone output, the USB-C charging, and the fact that you could use this as your all-in-one player and recorder due to having a line input on the side here as well. Now I see that We Are Rewind have given this the model number WE001, which might indicate that they're hoping to bring out future models in the range. I suppose it all very much depends upon how successful this one is. But if they were thinking of producing a sequel to this, the first thing that I would concentrate on would be finding a way to reduce that electrical noise floor. The next thing would be to lower the Wow and Flutter rate to somewhere under 2%, which would be good enough for a device like this. Perhaps implement a higher quality Bluetooth standard. Auto stop on fast wind would be useful, and an electrical erase head wouldn't go amiss either. But getting back to this current model, it's very probably the best quality, newly manufactured personal stereo cassette player on the market today, and it's available for €149 from the We Are Rewind website. I'd like to thank them for sending it over, and I hope this video has proved useful. But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.